Sup nerds, I'm Wes.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Aaron.
Today we're taking a look at Gambling Game's biggest game yet, designed by Scott Alms, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea.
And I remember, Scott, you were all like, hey guys, quit flipping the boxes in your videos. Well, oh, look at that. Would you...
We're gonna struggle now.
Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is a huge game that has tons of expansions that add more factions and mercenaries and all that stuff. For this review right now, we're just going to talk about the base game. We will talk about the expansions in other videos to get more in depth, but right now we're just going to talk about what we think about the game itself.
This game is a 4X game, so in it you will be exploring, expanding, exploiting the other players, and trying to exterminate them as well. And it's just a whole lot of chaos. You know, it's kind of like Risk on steroids. You know, there's no dice rolling, it's more strategic. But, you know, you're trying to balance the whole, you know, gather resources, spend resources to make more people, spend resources to upgrade your buildings and such, or, you know, actually spend them to fight people.
Yeah, and so being a 4X, then there's 4 different ways you can win, or really trigger endgame. Winning is just having the most points. But so there's different, like, branches you can go down trying to get your points and trying to grow and do those things. Not that you should really just choose one and stick with it. You kind of need to go for all, or at least 3 or 4 at the same time, because if you only go off in one direction, you're not focusing on like fighting at all. And then like Tom is focusing on fighting, he's just gonna come and like, oh, you're farming to grow your crops and stuff, wiping you out. Like, so you need to balance that. But I love these games where there's so many options for like your strategy. It's not like, all right, well, this game you're trying to do this thing. It's here's your options, have fun, do your thing.
Yeah, it's not like there's one main goal and it's whoever can do it faster or better.
Yeah.
And it is kind of a balance of a Euro-style, you know, resource management and building things in a certain order and triggering abilities and all that kind of stuff with the Risk style of, you know, going to attack other people, you know, and it does a good balance of that. But, you know, when we use terms like just a dude on a map type of board game, you know, when we use terms like Risk to you know, compare them, the biggest difference I would say is that Risk and other games, other area control games like that, tend to have choke points where, you know, you always get Australia because there's only one way in there. Mm-hmm. This game has very, very few of those. Like, it's only like, because you have the boats that you can make, the airships that you can make, the map itself is, you know, its own. It's like Pleasantville. The one end of this is just the beginning of that. You know, you feel like there's no safe borders. You can be attacked, in 360 degrees, anywhere you want. Anywhere you want, you can go and attack somebody. There's a small amount of, you know, if you don't have that airship out, or, you know, I can only move by march and I'm limited in spaces, so I can't get through these guys to get to that space. Sometimes you can do that, but you have to manufacture that. It's not just like Australia where, you know, there is a choke point. So that is probably the biggest feeling I get initially from sitting down in this, is almost like fear. Like, I have all these things you can do and all these things I want to do, but I am so vulnerable.
Yeah, and like you were saying, there's no choke points. There's like, I think every game at some point, someone's like, all right, I'm going to attack you here. I'm like, wait, what? How are you attacking me there? I wasn't prepared for an attack right there. Like, oh, well, I can follow this and go here, and then look, I'm there. And it's like, what? And unlike a Risk, I feel like a lot of times in Risk, you have like your borders, and each spot has like 20 dudes in it, and then all the interior just have like one little person there just to say, like, this is mine, claim it. You can kind of shore up your borders, but because there's so many, you're not really going to do that. And because you do need to be expanding onto other people's areas to plant your towers and to gather their resources and to take things away from them, you really don't have that turtling that happens in Risk either, because things are happening fast. The game can take a while, but things are still happening rapidly, and you can't turtle because you will be left behind.
I like turtles. The thing that actually does keep this game moving is the fact that you can follow other people's actions. If somebody takes a capital action and you haven't taken it, and you have a surf ready to go, you can follow that action. And, you know, so you don't really have that downtime that you have in some other games where you're like, okay, well, it's not my turn. Unless I get attacked, I'm not doing anything. You actually do have to think, like, oh, if he takes the build action, I do have enough resources, I want to build this next building. Or, oh, if he makes, you know, if he actually recruits people, I want to make a warrior.
Not only is that something that you can follow on not your turn, but it can affect your turn itself. You could say, well, I mean, I want to take this action, but I think he's going to take it, so I'll take this action instead, hoping that I can follow when he takes that.
And you can also use that mechanic to almost like force people's handed things, where if you tax really early, they might go, oh, let me follow that tax because I want to tax, and then they don't get the tax that they need it, or they cover that up too early. Or just there's so many mind games you can play with that where you're trying to predict what they're going to do and kind of trying to force their hand in doing things early. It's great.
It kind of reminds me of Roll for the Galaxy or Race for the Galaxy, where you take your action hoping that somebody else is going to take a different action type of thing. But I do like that it is not required in a sense. I mean, you could play this game and never follow. It's probably not going to happen because it's so advantageous to follow. But it's not like all the mechanics are based around knowing what the other players are doing. That's just like opportunity type of thing.
And it really can affect what you're doing because the guys you use your serfs to follow. So like, oh, I really want to send these serfs out to farm here, but then I won't have any serfs to follow with, so I need to hold these guys back to follow with them, and then you follow, then it comes to your turn, and you go to do, oh, now I'm going to build. Wait, I don't have a serf to build with anymore because I just used it to follow. So there's a lot of thinking with that.
You kind of have to engine build, where you have to like, okay, every turn I need to make more serfs so that the next round I can take more actions and follow more people and make sure I'm making more serfs until I have all of my serfs, because you actually you have to spend your serfs as a building as well. Like you put them permanently, you lose it if you build a building, so it like takes away from your supply, which is ingenious. It's like, okay, you can't do everything you want to do. Like you actually have to, if you're going to build all your buildings, you know that you're not going to be gathering tons of resources, because if you do that, then you can't take a bunch of actions. You won't be able to follow. Like you can't do everything,
but
you want to.
But you need those resources to build the buildings. So I don't think I've ever played a game where somebody's built all their buildings.
All of the serf buildings at the bottom there. Yeah, I don't.
I usually build three.
I mean they do combo really well with each other, and you do need to build some of them before you need to build them before you can do the heroes or the other constructs. So. Yeah, I do think, and the game doesn't last that long enough to do it. It's not just you're limited on resources, you're also limited on time, because there's so many ways a game can be triggered. However, I do think sometimes this game gets undersold on how quick it is, because those things that can trigger end game, sure, those are always like pressing, but you can also kind of stop them. The whole all I have to do is buy all my serfs and warriors and that'll trigger endgame. Yeah, but I could just kill the ones that are out there and then they go back to your supply and I can run that clock out.
I definitely think it's very game dependent. That you can play a game that only lasts 10 rounds because one person builds up super quick and just plants their towers out, especially in like a 2 and a 3 player game and you have an unoccupied island. I think that's especially easy because you only need to get one tower into enemy territory, one of your own, and one of this empty island. So you can have games that go pretty quick, but all in all, people are it's pretty obvious if you're about to trigger an in-game condition, unless it's like flipping over the tokens. That would take a little while to do anyway, I would feel like.
Well, there's one spell that will let you do it as an action. So if you scribe that spell and then you are already like moving out a whole bunch, and then as an extra action you can do that. So that could speed it up, or like if 2 people. I think there's probably 2 copies of that spell. If
Yeah.
Like, so there are always ways where you can say, well, if this, and this, then that scenario will trigger a lot faster. However, they aren't. The game isn't fast because it's only 8 rounds. The game isn't fast because there's nothing to do after a certain point. It's fast because 9 times out of 10 game end is going to be triggered quickly, but depending on who you're sitting with, they can mess with that time.
I also want to kind of put a caveat in when we're saying this game is fast. We're not saying it's a half hour, 45-minute game. Like a lot of quick games, you think like this is not a lunch break game. Like it's fast in comparison to other 4X games. If you're looking at this versus Twilight Imperium, or
Eclipse,
like 8 to 10 hours versus 2 to 4 hours. Like this game's so quick, and it's not a quick game. This is a game night game, but it's something that you're able to do in one sitting or in a regular game night, not like plan a night. We're gonna be all night playing. Playing a day to play this game.
Yeah. The one thing that does actually slow down the game time is I feel the tactics cards. Like there's that whole like rock paper scissors when you're like, okay, I'm gonna battle you. Oh crap! What do I want to play? Well, I can afford that one. I can't afford that one. You can't afford this one. Okay, and there's all this thinking of, okay, if I play this and he plays that, he'll win. But if I play this and he plays that, I'll win. and that can kind of slow it down.
The only issue I have with the combat, though, is there are scenarios when it can feel pretty deterministic. Like, because you can see their resources, and most of the cards have resources require, except for the nothing card, require you to spend resources. And while that is strategy, there are times when I look at somebody and say, ooh, they have a lot of resources, I'm probably not going to go attack them. Or, ooh, they don't have a lot of resources, now's the time to attack them. But there's sometimes where you can sit there, like if you weren't paying attention and you weren't planning for it, and someone's like, hey, I'm going to come and attack you, and you don't have enough resources, you're like, oh, wait, dang, I am going to lose this. Like, while with dice combat, sure, it does suck that, it's just rolling dice and, what luck of the dice hate me this time. But if you can, sometimes you can mitigate that luck, and at least you can kind of blame the dice. And here, it's like all on you. It's all your fault. You're like, oh, I left that open and I didn't have enough resources. And so like you're coming to attack me. It's like, yep, you just got a guaranteed win on that attack. You got a guaranteed point for starting, and you're gonna crush me.
Which is honestly something I really like about the game, that you can map out your combat, and I can say, I'm going to attack you, and I'm going to win. It's one of the things I don't like about games like Cosmic Encounter. That like, okay, I'm going to attack you with my entire force, I've been building up to this, and you have one guy there, and I'm going to win the game, I'm going to do this, and you happen to have the one card in the deck that, no, you lose. Sorry, you lose all your guys. Sucks to be you.
Okay, I see. That's kind of a bad comparison, though. These two games are not at all.
But just
like
combat in general, I like that there's a fixed set of cards in your hand, and so I know what your possibilities are. I know what my possibilities are, and it makes combat make more sense to me. I feel like if combat was a major force in the game, and I say, okay, I've spent all these turns getting resources and building an army and being ready to fight, and you've spent your whole turn building buildings, so you spent all your resources, now's the time to attack you. And I go to attack you, and you're like, oh, well, I actually had this one thing that you didn't know about because it's hidden in my hand, and it's going to actually cancel your attack.
Okay. Well, that can happen because of spells.
Yeah, spells can cancel some things, but
there's no, the one trump card. I mean, okay, I see what you're saying, but just the idea of deterministic combat in general, to me, I want to say doesn't seem fair, but how is
that unfair? I have a bigger army, I'm more powerful than you,
right.
I win.
Okay, but in dice combat, though, it's like, I have a bigger army, I have a much, much, much better chance. Not, there's nothing you can do about it. That's where I think we did. And again, and that's not saying this combat isn't completely deterministic. There are instances where that happens. The combat can be great when we both have a lot of resources and we both have a lot of dudes and triggers, abilities that can trigger, and we're like, oh my god, what's going to happen? There's a lot of really tense battles. But there are some, not a lot, a couple times when it's like, yeah, that's going to happen. There's nothing I can do about it. So that's the only issue in those couple times. Again, that's why I say, in Risk or in any type where there's dice combat or some RNG built into combat, is because I've set myself up to have a really, 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 really good chance. Not I've set myself up to where you can't win, sayonara.
And I think the flip side of that is you started us off by saying, if you're not paying attention, and I realize you built up this thing, that's why it's so important for you to always be looking at all the different aspects and say, I'm building, but I can't build when I have just enough resources to build and not do anything else. You really need to balance your forces to have a decent army such that if someone attacks you, you're not guaranteed to win, but maybe I could have enough resources to spend this card or something like that. And I don't know. To me, that's a combat game should have that, where I know I'm going to win because I've spent so much time building up an army to beat you where you've been doing something else.
And the one thing, if you do get attacked, as long as you have some resources and you can't afford a card, you can actually get victory points from losing that battle, which is kind of cool. He gets a point for initiating it, he'll get points for the cards he plays to crush me, but if I play something back and I can actually afford it, as long as I don't need those resources for another action I was planning on taking, I can actually earn points for this battle.
One thing that I do really like about this game is the differing of the factions. They all have these, your boards do kind of look the same, with the same number of buildings, and you still have to build, your tower up 3 levels. There's nothing that feels like it's super OP, where I have this one thing that you don't have. Okay, there is something like that in an expansion, kind of, but we'll get there. For the base game, we all kind of sort of start the same, but we just have different incentives. The buildings we build and the heroes that we have, their special abilities do kind of combo together and incentivize and push you to do a certain thing, which can be a blessing and a curse, because if you don't do that thing for whatever reason, like when we played, we actually had the opportunity to play this with Scott Alms and Gamlin and Roy Kennedy from Epic Gaming Night at Gen Con. I was playing the Goblins, which is an expansion faction, and their thing, if you look at all of their buildings and all their heroes, are all about having a lot of units, just really flooding the board with all your units. But I scribed a spell that said, well, if you go out and fight with a warrior by himself, he gets like +4 attack, and I was like, ooh, that's really good because I can do this and this and this and save a lot of dudes. But then I kind of focused on that too much and didn't spend a lot of time getting a lot of dudes and flooding the board. So as I then built buildings and stuff, I was like, oh, I'm not prepared for my faction's thing. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have to do what they're doing, but it's definitely behooves you to do so.
And I think that just fits back in to kind of the overarching feel of this game, is that there are a lot of things we're paying attention to. There are so many things you need to be, okay, I need to be building this, but I also need to be building this. I need to be beating these people so that I can build these things, and I can also send them out to farm. And I don't want to say it's overwhelming, but it's definitely not like an intro game. This is a serious game, and...
Well, okay. The word that Sean, a guy from our local game store, used with this is he said, this is probably the most accessible 4X game I ever played. So you're right, 4X games in general aren't intro games. They're pretty high level. But he's like, this is a lot easier to teach than Twilight Imperium or Eclipse or something. Like, it's overwhelming at first, but by round 2 or 3, which I usually say is when people should be getting a game, but by round 2 or 3, you're like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
So this could be your introduction, just like have them play this, and then if you want to move up to the more complicated versions, Eclipse, Eximus, Proxima, blah, 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 whatever it is, you can, this is a great intro into a bigger, right?
I like what you're saying, but what I want to I'm going to let you finish.
No, I'm gonna let you finish. But Twilight Imperium had the best music video.
I don't want you guys to get the idea that this is like a tiny 4X game or those are the real 4X games. I fully believe that this in itself is a fantastic 4X game. I don't think that it's like, oh, well, you play this at first, but you're really going to want to get this other game later.
Yeah.
I'm happy with this game, and I think this might be my favorite 4X that I've played.
Ooh. Look, I'm not saying that this is, the easiest version, this is the intro, but most accessible was a really good term because it's the easiest to get into. Those other ones just have a lot more complexity in it such that you shouldn't think about, okay, you've never played a game like this, here, sit down and play Twilight Imperium, let me teach it to you. This is a much easier one to grasp. It definitely hits home in the 4X, it's not like, oh, it's a weak,
You may be wondering, how good is this game, like, quality-wise? And that can be answered with a good, 2 thumbs up from me. Like, I love these minis. I love the artwork and the color. Like, it's great. But there are some downfalls to the constructs, I would say, right?
Is one of the downfalls the way you started that sentence?
The constructs are kind of innovative. Like, they do add a lot of depth to the game, 3D depth. That's what, Ooh. They actually have a use on the board, and instead of just having a token there or something, you're building up your capital, and it actually builds up. So you can see that, oh, he's a level 2 tower, and it's not like something that's very, you can't hide it too easily. Like, everything's, public knowledge, but it's like, oh, he just got to level 2. Oh, he just got to level 3 in his capital. It's something you can see. But, building them, you can kind of, diminish the quality of these,
I will say, as far as building them, that when you get this game, because you're going to get this game, don't expect to go buy it from the store, open it up, and start playing it. It probably took me 2 hours to build all the constructs, and that's this game and the expansions and everything.
And you have a kid.
Yeah, but it is a chore to put these together. Now, if you really like really simple 3D puzzles, this is going to be the best part of the game for you. And like Aaron said, there can be times you're putting the roof on top of the tower and it kind of peels back the layer that has the artwork. And you're like, oh no, put it back. Hold it, glue. Put it on there. And then they recommend using glue and tweezers and some tape and all that to put it together.
It does kind of reduce the shelf life in effect. I would like to hear from some, I don't paint minis, but people who do, a lot of times will talk about sealants that they can spray. I would wonder if there is a good sealant out there because of the fact that they're cardboard. I don't know if it interacts with plastic different or whatever, but I wonder if that is feature or something that you could do to kind of combat that, especially because once you build these, you do keep them built. You don't build them and unbuild them every time you pull out the game.
Or if they wear down way faster.
Yeah. If that was the case, if the box was a lot smaller or something, then I would be like, oh yeah, this was ridiculous.
Huge negative,
obviously not. And I did think that they were kind of gimmicky at first when I saw them. I was like, yeah, that's cool and interesting, but they do toe the gimmicky line of like, ooh, look at the cool thing that doesn't really serve a purpose. But playing it, they actually kind of do. The fact that the level 2 and 3 is just easily visible, just from across the table. It's like, ooh, that guy's, now he has the ability to do this and this, just to kind of know that. And the towers themselves also, they're just boom. Since it's an end game condition to be like 1, 2, and really see them, I do actually kind of see their purpose now. They aren't as gimmicky as I thought they were.
And on top of all of that, like, theme matters in games. Getting into the spirit of the game and feeling it and like getting excited about it is something that, especially in these very like American style games, is important. And this is definitely a game that like is impressive to look at. It's a game that if you're playing at your local game store and we're playing at Gamesville Tabletop, like people are going to stop and look at the table and they're going to sit there and look, and like not because like, oh, I really like that there's cards or whatever, but it just looks so impressive when you're playing it.
Yeah, I was playing it at Gamesville, and we had, part of it was because we had the big playmat out, and it was a 5-player game, or maybe it was 4. I don't know, but we had the big playmat out, and everything's really colorful, and there's so much stuff. People walking around, we're like, whoa, what is this? So that is true, and you're right, theme does matter, and component quality does matter, because there was a time during the Kickstarter when they were gonna make a standee version and then eventually opted out of that, which is good because the standee version is what we got for the prototype. And I have that here at my house. Yet I drove to Wesley's house to pick up this copy because I'd much rather play with the miniatures over the standees. Like that stuff, as gimmicky or finicky or whatever you want to call it. Finicky probably isn't the right word, but whatever you want to call it, it matters.
Overall, I think Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is an excellent game. Like, I really enjoy not the combat, but the idea of combat in this game, because the tactic cards, I kind of do prefer dice over this, like, mathematical, ooh, what should I do? But, like, the fact that you're building up this entire race, you actually have to, get more people, you have to build your buildings, you have to expand out and, like, collect resources, like, it's very epic feeling. It's, this is not a tiny epic game, it's just an epic game. And it's great. I really, every time we've played it, I've had fun, playing a new faction and trying to, like, figure out their strategy and, like, okay, I should, try and build more towers, build my towers quicker with this race, or I should, try and, just be very defensive with this race, or, this one, it's really good to build the ship and go out and, do stuff that way. You definitely need to, look at your board and kind of figure out what strategy you're going to take. But after that, it's just, the fact that there's no downtime, there's, tons of player interaction, you're constantly like, oh, if he does that, I'm doing this, and I'm, you just feel like you're, just rocking along, and you're building this epic stuff up, and then, you're getting your teeth kicked in because he built it up bigger, or, something, it's a lot of fun, and I cannot recommend it enough.
I want to agree with Aaron that I do really love it, maybe slightly less than him because there are a couple negatives that I have, as I said, with the combat. I probably I prefer dice combat, and there are a couple instances when I do feel like the combat, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I guess it's just what's going to happen. Component quality, I do think, is really great. The minis it's not Kingdom Death, but it's pretty high up there. They definitely are like a 7 or an 8 in terms of how that works. And it does take up a lot of table space, so that could be an issue. It is really colorful, which is a little bit of a negative for me because I like things to be a little bit more dark. But like I'm saying these because I'm trying to pull negatives. No game is perfect, so there are going to be some things that I'm not going to like. But I'm like, scraping the bottom of the barrel here to be like, well, it's not perfect because of this reason, I guess, and because of that reason. But other than that, it is super, super awesome. I don't think it would hit my top 10, but it would probably go into my top 20. Maybe if I played it a couple more times and really felt like I got the all the factions, because we got the expansion at the same time, so we had 8 factions to try and all learn, so it kind of felt a little overwhelming. Easily top 20, could be top 10 if I played it a bit more. It's definitely something that will birth a whole new generation of gamers because it is the most accessible 4X game out there. It'll take people from the Ticket to Ride complexity games and step up, and then hit this, and then realize I shouldn't have a limit on complexity because this seems so complex, and yet I got it so well that, it'll make people want to just hit all different genres and all different levels of games because they'll realize that even though this has a lot of stuff going on, it's pretty easy to figure out once you kind of get it. So Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Boom City.
Tom, I love what you said there because one of our goals as Neverboard Gaming is to try to branch. We want to reach people that aren't gamers. We don't want to just reach people who are at their game store and looking at games. We want to reach people who are at big box stores and looking at games and what could be next. And I got this cool game called Pandemic or Chameleon that I found. And there's a review for it. What else have they done? Things like that is, I think that gaming should be a part of every household. The same way that most kids grew up playing Monopoly and Candyland and all these like old school games, that there's no reason that games like this shouldn't be in every household. I don't want gaming to be that nerdy thing anymore, and I think that this game is a great step in that direction. It's accessible, it's cool to look at. I think it's fairly easy to teach. It's definitely not like an intro basic game, but for what it is, they do such a good job making the mechanics streamlined and just work really smooth in my opinion, that it's fantastic. I will say I'm next to positive this game is going to be in my top 5, maybe even top 3. It's definitely my favorite 4X game. I've decided that since I talked about it earlier. It is my favorite 4X game. I think that the minis and the constructs work together just to make everything pop and come alive. It's fantastic. I do have a wife and a kid at home. I don't have time for 8-hour board games anymore in my life. That just, I'm not saying it can never happen, but it is going to be a rarity. Like maybe like Extra Life or Gen Con, and that's it. So this being a massive big scale game that I can fit into a 3 to 4 hour window just means that it's going to hit my table. Like yes, the price may be a little bit high, especially compared to Gamlen's other games, but if you're looking at this next to TI4, get this in the expansion. It's great. So, just make sure you're comparing it to the right thing with that. Regardless, I cannot recommend that you guys pick up this game enough.
Right before you say enough, cut it. I cannot recommend that you guys pick up this game. So if this sounds like a game that you want to get to your table and hang out with your friends and play, you should definitely get yourself a copy. There's a link in the description below.
And hey, while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you'll never
Be bored.
Yeah.